Ahoy, mateys! Welcome back to Sailing with whatever this is. Oh yeah, the cruise ship safety and security channel, where we teach you the essentials of boating, and sometimes how not to boat. Today, we're talking about that big heavy thing that looks like it's ready to start a fight with your boat. The anchor. But what does an anchor actually do? And why is it so much heavier than your sense of responsibility? Well, grab your life jacket and put your boat shoes on, because we're about to dive deep into how anchors work, why they're the emergency brake for your boat, and what happens when you royally mess it up. Spoiler alert, it's not pretty. Now when we say emergency brake, we mean the boat equivalent of slamming on the brakes in your car, except this time, it's gonna take you, your boat, and probably a few unsuspecting fish down with you. Think of the anchor like that one friend who holds everyone back at the bar when you're trying to leave. The anchor's job is to make sure your boat stays put, even when you're like, I'm just gonna drift for a minute. That minute turns into 3 hours and whoops, now you're halfway to the Bahamas without even trying. But what happens if you mess it up? Well, if you don't anchor correctly, you're basically playing a game of where's my boat now? Spoiler, it's somewhere embarrassing. You see, when you toss that anchor overboard, it's supposed to catch onto the ground, usually a nice solid patch of mud or sand, and hold you in place. But if you're not paying attention, or worse, you're a complete amateur, your boat is going to drift away like your New Year's resolutions. One of the most common mistakes, dropping the anchor and not letting it sink properly. You can't just throw it in the water and hope for the best. This isn't a fishing game. This is life or death, or at least not embarrassing your friends at the marina stakes. And if you really mess up, well, your boat can get dragged into a dock, get stuck in rocks, or worst of all, make the "I'm not paying attention, please don't sue me" face when a fellow boater yells at you. Now the key to a solid anchor job is the 3-to-1 rule. For every foot of water depth, you should have 3 feet of anchor line out. That's right, math on a boat. It's like a homework assignment, except if you get it wrong, your boat might take a nap in the wrong place. If you don't have enough line out, you're not anchoring. You're basically playing a game of, can I float into a very awkward situation? Now let's talk about the most important part. What happens if you drop the anchor wrong? You might end up dragging your boat around like a teenager at a family reunion. The boat's gonna start moving, you'll be chasing your anchor, and you'll get to know every single person within a 2-mile radius at the dock. And trust me, they won't be impressed. They'll be like, so, how long you been boating? And when it comes to anchoring properly, make sure you're pulling it back up in a steady and consistent manner. If you try to yank it like a bad Tinder date, you're just asking for trouble. Just a little tug, not a wrestling match with the sea. It's not the WWE. The last thing you want is to give your boat a backstage pass to the bottom of the ocean. So to recap, your anchor is your boat's emergency brake. It's like a giant heavy metallic hero that saves the day. But if you treat it like it's just a paperweight, things are gonna get rocky. Literally. Follow the 3-to-1 rule. Don't get lazy. And remember, anchors aren't just for holding your boat in place. They're also for holding on to your dignity when you mess up. Alright, enough about me making fun of anchors. Let's dive into the juicy history of these giant metal monsters. Believe it or not, anchors have been around for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians were some of the first to use early forms of anchors around 3500 BC. They basically used giant stones with holes in them that could be tied to ropes and dropped into the water. It was like a really bad idea for a paperweight, but somehow it worked. As boating evolved over time, so did anchors. The ancient Greeks and Romans added some upgrades, using metal anchors with barbed hooks that could catch onto the sea floor like an old-school fishing lure. They started to realize, hey, maybe tying our boat to a bunch of rocks isn't the most efficient method. Fast forward a couple of centuries, and we get the classic fluke anchor that we all know today, named after the fluke, or the arms, that catch the seafloor. This design was used by sailors in the 17th century, and basically revolutionized anchoring by giving boats the ability to actually stay in place without drifting off into, well, whatever disaster they were trying to avoid. By the 1800s, the modern version of the anchor as we know it was developed. It was bigger, badder, and more reliable, able to anchor larger ships and withstand crazy ocean currents. And guess what? It still works today. That's right, folks. Anchors have been doing their thing for thousands of years, keeping boats grounded and people from looking totally ridiculous at the marina. Now, before we wrap up, here's the most important thing to remember about anchors. If you treat it right, it'll save you from a world of trouble. If not, well, you'll just have to pray the tide doesn't decide to drag you into a dock, or worse, a rocky shoreline. All right, sailors, drop a comment below if you've ever had an anchor fail. No judgment here. Smash that like button like you're dropping an anchor. And don't forget to subscribe for more adventures in boating and not sinking. Catch you next time.